All right, a happy Thursday trade guide video. Brooklyn Nets. I had done a 7-minute soliloquy of the Brooklyn Nets, and then all of a sudden my screen froze. So that's how it goes here when you're doing stuff in your office on your Mac. And so we'll do a new video. We've got a bunch of trade guide videos up already. Boston went up on Thursday. We've got the Lakers, we've got Phoenix, we've got Milwaukee, we've got the Pistons, the Wizards, we've got a Siakam trade guide video. The actual trade guides itself come out next week, Eastern and Western Conference. I think Tuesday, Wednesday. Everything you want to know about each team, soup to nuts. Trade meter, what to watch, front office history, draft history, cap, draft picks, everything. All in one as far as each, based on each conference. Here's a trade we'd like to see. Brooklyn is interesting for me, well, certainly because I've worked there, but they're just in this funk right now and in this weird spot because Houston controls their picks in 24 and 26 unprotected, and then pick swaps in 25 and 27. Those are from the James Harden trade. We'll get into Phoenix and the Dallas picks that Brooklyn has. It's an interesting dynamic because they are out of the top 10 right now. They've had some bad losses lately. 2 to Portland. Certainly the Miami loss was a bad loss. Portland especially is a bad loss. And you've got a lot of players on your roster that a lot of teams would like, whether it be Spencer Dinwiddie or Royce O'Neal or Dorian Finney-Smith. Then I'm going to talk about Mikal Bridges in a minute. Cam Johnson has struggled mightily. Cam Johnson has gone from a starter to has struggled. It's basically Mikal Bridges on an island by himself out there. And when you have a team that controls your picks and you're struggling, and you do have a lot of tradable assets, it makes you kind of put yourself in a position where on one end you're saying, well, wait a minute, we have to stay competitive. We can't tear this down, or we can't take a step back because there's no incentive. It's not like we're going to have the 11th pick in the draft and now all of a sudden we're going to have the 5th pick in the draft. And I only say that is because I remember when I worked in Brooklyn and how it ended in Brooklyn. I'm not going to get into all that, but that last year in Brooklyn, the year we lost to Atlanta in the first round, we were like a 500 team. We were just basically hanging on for dear life, and we had traded. Pierce had gone to the Clippers, and Garnett we traded for Thaddeus Young in Minnesota, and basically we're like, we're not going to be a playoff team anymore, but God, we already owe Boston so much. We just need to make sure it's not like a top 4 or top 5 pick, even if we're 36 and 46. And then Sean Marks came in, and the philosophy and the thinking was terrific. Like when Sean came in 2016, I believe, I was already gone a year. There were no ties to the the Boston trade. Like he did not have his fingerprints on it. Like he could reconstruct and rebuild how he wanted to do it, how him and his new front office wanted to do it. And it was admirable because he didn't care the Celtics could get the 3rd pick in the draft or the 4th pick in the draft, and which eventually turned out to into Tatum and Brown as far as those two players there. Where if we had stayed and we were still part of it, we would have probably just been hanging on in 34 and 48, but the 9th pick and stuff. And that's the interesting philosophy. And why I'm saying that is that now the Nets it's not the same position. The team is better than it was when Sean, trust me, it's a lot better when Sean took over. And they're in a better position with draft equity except for their own. But they're in this same position where part of you wants, the Nets to be like, you know what? We're just going to move forward. We've already owed those picks to Houston. We're going to, if we have to take a step back, we're going to move off of Royce O'Neal for 2 seconds. We're going to do something with Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith. We're going to take a step back and just continue to build up our draft assets, even if that means we're going to go 30 and 52 right now. And that's the part of the thinking. And then there's the other part of it where it's the current front office that moved was part of the Harden trade and traded those picks and and then you have that thinking, as I said, there's no incentive for you to take a major step back because Houston controls what you have in the next 4 years. Now, the question will be what happens if there's a deal and you can get draft equity and it makes the roster worse. That's something that the Nets front office is going to have to figure out, kind of what's the best interest long term compared to what's the best interest right now. But when you look at this roster and, listen, when they're not making shots, and I'm not going to go into a net scattering report, when they're not making shots, it's a struggle, man. You look at that Miami game, you look at the Portland game, points in the paint. There's a lot of different things you can pick at. And the funny thing is they've got a lot of players that a lot of teams like. Mikal Bridges, last year there was a team out there that, would have offered 4 first-round picks, and they likely would have, most of them would have been unprotected. And Brooklyn's in his spot with Bridges where he's not available in trade talks. Woj has already come out and said that. He's the guy they want to build around. But the new CBA did not help Mikal Bridges and the Brooklyn Nets because the extension rules where it's only 140%, and when you're Mikal Bridges making $20 million, after this year, he's extension eligible. I would say it's highly unlikely that Mikal Bridges would sign an extension just because it's a below market deal. And if you're Brooklyn and you're in the same spot a year from now and you're struggling, what do you do with Mikal Bridges? That's a question for down the road and everything, but that's going to come to fruition eventually here if this doesn't turn around. And that's something that Brooklyn's going to have to answer. For me, when we wrote the trade guide, there's a lot of different ways that we look at it. Certainly a lot what we just talked about. You got to figure out who your point guard is down the road here. You've got Spencer Dinwiddie on an expiring contract. You've got Dennis Smith Jr., who's on a minimum expiring contract. You've got, who knows when we're ever going to see Ben Simmons again. He's got another year after this in the 40s, low 41 $million. Can you parlay Dinwiddie into a guard that's under contract for multiple seasons? You're not going to have cap space this coming off season. That's a likely no as far as where the Nets are going to be. And if you do, it's not going to be enough unless you start moving salaries and everything like that. Because you've got Cam Johnson, you've got Mikal Bridges, you've got Finney Smith, you've got the Claxton hold, and then you've got Simmons, who's basically tying up 30% of your salary cap. You didn't have Ben Simmons, you'd be in really good shape here. So for me, it's what do you do at the deadline with Spencer Dinwiddie? Can you parlay that into? I've said all along. I've said it on with Mike Scotto. I said it with I think Wendy that I think DeJounte Murray would be perfect. Would it cost you the Dinwiddie, the Phoenix pick, and you can put some protection on it in 25, and maybe something else. I'm sure Atlanta would want based on what they gave up. It's almost like Atlanta's in that same position here. Does Malcolm Brogdon make sense for you, who's got 2 years left? You get a player that has another. Brogdon's been like the Nets killer in these Portland games. Does Malcolm Brogdon make sense for you as far as from that perspective here? So for the big thing is you've got to figure out what your point guard position is going to be. What do you do with Royce O'Neal, who's on an expiring contract? I have Royce O'Neal in a lot of trades I would like to see, not Nets related. Like if Phoenix came along and offered Nasir Little and Josh Okogie and 2-2s, would you do it for Royce O'Neal? I mean, those are the type of things that are going to come up as far as what the Nets. I'm sure there is a line of teams with Dorian Finney-Smith who has this year, next year, and then a player option at non-tax mid-level money, $13 million range here. Teams would love those big wings, those 6'8", 6'9", wings as far as their. Nicholas Claxton's going to be a free agent here. What's your comfort level as far as re-signing him? What's his number going to be? Is it going to be 16 to 18? How does Cam Thomas fit in long term? He's extension eligible here. I'm kind of tying in their off-season guide into this trade guide, but there's just a lot of different questions as far as when it comes to Brooklyn. And then the other thing is that which is interesting is they've got all these draft picks, right? You've got 25, 27, 28, 29. You got a first from Philadelphia, in there. 4 of those are, unprotected. And then you've got a protected from first. I think it's in 27, I want to say that can convey to 28. What happens when that next all-star becomes disgruntled? And there is no all-star out there disgruntled. I mean, I'm not ready to put Zach LaVine in there, and I'm not saying Brooklyn should go all in on Zach LaVine, but what happens when that next guy becomes disgruntled? Are you willing to go all in again? And really, you really only went all in on Harden. You didn't do a Durant and Irving were signed as free agent. You went all in on Harden, and that basically blew up for a lot of different reasons, and we don't have enough time to talk about. But are you willing to kind of go all in again? And does that leave a kind of, did what happened before leave a sour taste in your mouth? But there are, I'm telling you, there's like the trade meter for Brooklyn, which is an 8, probably should be a little bit higher here. Because as far as expiring contracts, don't control your pick. You've got all this draft equity. Made the Durant trade last year. What else? And you've got these monster trade exceptions that expire in the summer. You've got a $20 million one, an $18 million one, a 6-8, a 4-5. They've got all their cash. They're $8 million below the luxury tax. They're in good shape as far as from that standpoint. They've got all the. If the Nets had their own picks, they would be in a perfect situation, but they don't. But they have a lot of picks from other teams, as I talked about, 25, 27, and 29 from Phoenix. Right to swap with Phoenix in 28. They've got a Mavericks pick in 29. They got a top 8 protected first from Philly in 27 or 28. 5 seconds available here. So that's it in a nutshell as far as the Brooklyn Nets here. But there's a lot of decisions they have to make. Certainly a lot of questions. For a team that's struggling right now.